In this video, we are going to go over the pushing stage of labor, what to expect and what to do, such as how to push during labor, and ways to avoid vaginal tearing. Hi, my name is Dancee Pinkston, also known as Fearless Mama, and this is part 4 of my new labor signs and stages series, where I go over the signs and what to expect and what to do to promote an easier labor and birth experience. And stage 2 has just one phase, the pushing phase. So this phase begins once full dilation has been reached and the cervix is no longer in front of the baby's head or bottom, so it can then easily travel down the birth canal. This stage is usually much more manageable than the other stages, since the contractions are a different sensation than the others previously. The body will naturally push involuntarily to expel the baby from the uterus. Letting your body guide with little to no conscious effort allows your body time to stretch during crowning, ending the phase with the birth of the baby. So let's go over the signs of the pushing phase. Dilation is at 10 centimeters. Contractions have a defined resting period, are usually 3 to 5 minutes apart, lasting 45 to 90 seconds each. And unlike before, no menstrual-like cramping. This stage can last a few minutes to several hours. The length of this stage is also dependent on if medication is being used, the baby's positioning in the uterus, and the mother's pushing position. For unmedicated births and experienced mothers, this stage typically is shorter than in medicated births, but let me reassure you, it is not a race. Mothers with epidurals may feel the urge to push. They may feel rectal or pelvic floor pressure, or no sensation at all, and may need to follow coached pushing by a care provider, dependent on the individual and the medication used. In some unmedicated births, the active pushing phase may be more accurately described as the fetal ejection reflex. The fetal ejection reflex, or FER, is the natural involuntary pushing mechanism that the body uses to eject baby out like a piston. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, make sure to check out my video where I demonstrate the fetal ejection reflex, and I also go into detail on what the contraction feels like and its purpose to create this reflex. But in this video, I'm going to be talking about the fetal ejection reflex and what you can do to promote it and how it helps with preventing vaginal tearing. Some extra signs of the pushing phase. Just before the FER, the fetal ejection reflex, contractions tend to ease up and decrease. And pushing, like having a bowel movement, is rarely required if you wait for this reflex to kick in. And it's so much more easier and gentler on the body to just breathe baby out when each powerful surge is felt, which we are also going to be talking about how to breathe baby out. During the late pushing stage, you tend to have a burst of renewed energy. This passive waiting phase of the second stage of labor is a time of rest, sometimes even called laboring down, as the baby rotates and descends down onto the pelvic floor. This passive phase sometimes happens after the mother is fully dilated and as she then waits for the urge to push. Next is crowning, which is the tingling, burning, stinging sensations felt as the baby's head or bottom emerges. Also known as the famous ring of fire. Also about to talk about that and how to best cope with that. Also, it is super common to see a little extra bleeding, minor bowel movements, and urination. Okay, let's talk about what to do about all these signs and sensations and how you can help prevent vaginal tearing. The main concern about this phase, right? And also just making this experience as easy and as short as possible. So number 1, to help prevent vaginal tearing is to stay hydrated. Just as your stretching belly needs extra moisture, so does your perineum. Number 2 is to push in lateral pushing positions. I go into way more detail on the 3 lateral positions in my pushing positions video and why they are excellent and great for preventing vaginal tearing. The number 3 tip to prevent vaginal tearing and to make this phase so much smoother is to wait for the fetal ejection reflex. Waiting for the fetal ejection reflex reduces stress, vaginal tearing, and keeps a great balance in hormones that allows for that birthing magical experience. The fetal ejection reflex is best felt when the mother feels fully safe, supported, and allowed to birth in peace. This reflex can be very rare to be seen or experienced in a birth filled with interventions, inductions, and medications, as those things do interfere with the natural birthing hormones. This is the only part of labor when the fight or flight mode is present and should be present only in this stage. This boost of adrenaline can make the mom seem unreasonable and emotional, but should be met with nothing but kind words and encouragement to keep laboring. If it is taking too long for the fetal ejection reflex to kick in, mom may need that boost of adrenaline to kickstart it. You may have to think of a scenario that you do not want to happen, like the possible need of using a vacuum or forceps or a transfer to the hospital, or whatever would be disturbing to you and your birth. During the actual fetal ejection reflex, the contractions work to push baby down until finally a huge burst of oxytocin is released, and then the baby is ejected out like a piston in just 3 to 4 strong contractions. Okay, so the fourth tip to reduce vaginal tearing and to make this so much more smoother is to do J breathing, or breathing baby out. I asked a large group of ladies what they did to avoid zero vaginal tearing, and it all came down to one common denominator, and it was to breathe baby out. Breathing baby out is like pushing like you're blowing out a candle, but in order to do this, you must wait for the fetal ejection reflex. Like I said, true pushing like you're having a bowel movement is rarely required if you wait for this reflex to kick in. So women actually breathe their babies out down the birth path by sending breath down their body. An excellent visualization to pair with this type of breathing is to envision the body as a J, with the out breath following the shape of the J down and out the birth path. So instead of forcefully blowing air out of the mouth or holding your breath, blow like you would blow out a candle and think about directing that breath downward. An excellent way to monitor if you are doing this correctly is to place a hand on top of the belly or just underneath the bust, because this area should really tighten as breath is expelled. The advantage of this type of breathing is that it allows the perineum to stay relaxed as the baby is descending, thus reducing the risk of tearing and allowing a shorter, smoother pushing stage. Okay, let's talk about the ring of fire. What is it and how can you cope with it? So the ring of fire is when the baby starts to emerge or crowns, there tends to be a burning or tingling sensation from the stretching or tearing of the perineum tissue. So before you start doing a ton of perineal massages, studies show that they're probably worthless. It may even cause tiny micro tears and swelling, and is super uncomfortable, distracting, and awkward. But a much better and easier option would be warm compresses. Warm compresses during crowning also feels nice and relieves some of that burning. But warm compresses have also been shown to help decrease the incidence of tearing. The standard protocol at out-of-hospital births is to use warm compresses on the perineum with a crock pot full of rags and warm water and ginger simmering at the bottom, which smells great, by the way. So how to do warm compresses? All you need is very warm water and about 5 to 10 washcloths that are usually kept warm in a crock pot. You just wring the washcloth out, making sure it is not too hot to the hands, and then is placed onto the perineum with firm support while the baby is crowning. The same techniques can be used for water births by providing firm support to the perineum with the hand, usually done by the mother herself. And my last tip to make this stage so much smoother and to prevent vaginal tearing is to relax and take your time. I encourage you to not force push when it really starts to burn. That's letting your body know that you need to take a step back for a second and allow your perineum to stretch, with or without feeling the fetal ejection reflex. So you can at least do that and apply the perineum support when you feel like it or need it. Then relax and just guide baby out. Pushing or crowning can be a process of going one step forward and taking 2 steps back. So don't let that discourage you, because it's most likely allowing more time for your perineum to stretch and decrease your risk of tearing. So definitely not a race to push baby out in however many minutes or hours. It's also important to wait a minute after the baby's head is out to then allow time for your perineum to stretch to then get the shoulders out. You also want to stay present and calm and want to remember this special moment. And just bring baby into the world peacefully. In a book called Presence, written by researcher Amy Cuddy, she shares how when being present is when you're at your most truest self. A very powerful state to be in, and also when you can remember the best. So mindful breathing techniques can really help you stay present, and I go into much more detail on that in my breathing techniques video. Next is the afterbirth, which I go into much more detail in the next video on what happens to the mom and baby after the baby is out, and also some great recommendations on what to do for that last stage of labor. Alright, that's all I have for you in this video. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.